Wow, yeah, welcome to Academy of Tone 152, correct? Yes. Today is a big Marshall show. We all heard the news that the company has been sold to a Swedish company that already worked with Marshall since 2010. The company is called Zounds Industry, and they already did very successfully these headphones, which I actually have myself as well. The white ones for the girlies and some black ones for the real Marshall guys. They also do the Bluetooth speakers and some other, more kind of lifestyle and consumer products, not the real deal guitar amps, what we all know and love as guitarists ourselves. At the end of this episode, we are showing a fantastic interview with my dear friend Geoffrey Whitehorn, to be seen here. Where this were the good old Hugues and Kettner days, where we all spent a lot of time together. Or we can see these old pictures which I showed the other day already. Maybe we can see this from back in the days, Paris. Me being, I don't know, 20 or something like this. And here this is, wait a minute, huh? Okay, that's me being super young. And in this one you can see Geoffrey Whitehorn being the Marshall demonstrator, and Nico McBrain of Iron Maiden waiting on the drum set, being a little bit bored. But we were hanging out, had a great time. And the song that I was playing is actually one of mine, called Thomas and Thijs. Thijs van Leer, the guy on the flute and the organ, known from Focus, the band. And this was one of the songs that I used to play back in the days on trade shows. And I know that Geoffrey Whitehorn loved it so much. And by now I even know why. Because he has a solo record from the mid-70s, I think 1976, where he also had a flute on it. So he has been there where I have been like 15 years later. Anyway, so this will be at the end of this episode, a quite long interview, but super interesting because we touch anything. We go back, and for me, when I heard the news that the company Marshall is being sold, it was shocking. It was emotionally shocking because look at all my Marshalls. Look at all my. I spent half of my entire life chasing Marshall amplifiers, getting the best ones, getting the best tubes, trying to mod them. And they have been the backdrop of my life. They have been the backdrop of the 70s and 80s, the wall of sound, cabinets, stacks, all that big impression. It's iconic. It is Jim Marshall, the father of loud, and Marshall being a synonym for rock music and a synonym for guitar heroes. So for me, it was more than just a guitar amp manufacturer. It was, or it is, sorry that I kind of speak in the past about the whole thing. For me, it's been such a big part of my life. And I'm still loving all the sounds that I'm hearing from all these amplifiers. That news that the company got sold made me think a little bit deeper. And I want to see kind of the big picture, what's actually going on in the whole industry. We're not only seeing a shift in owners with Marshall, we have seen Fender, Leo Fender, even leaving his own company like in the mid 60s and selling it to a TV corporation, CBS, and we all know what happened to their quality. This is a pre-CBS Fender. Okay, you know what I mean? So this guitar was back from the days where Leo Fender was still in his own company. And, you know, I'm still playing that guitar because this is kind of it's my best guitar. It's simple as that. And if I look on all my amplifiers here, if I'm talking Marshalls, I would say my GTM 45 is probably the best in my amp collection. And I use all these selected amps as a reference for my own amps because we can do the A/B tests afterwards. I'm not missing anything in the sound anymore. I think my amps are so close and maybe even work better. They are definitely lighter, more solid, and easier to handle. They are simply a more modern concept. But it all goes back to this beautiful looking dark greenish head. And when I thought a little bit deeper about what I have been doing in my life, I found, you know, very old pictures like the one in the studio where I was like maybe 20 or something, and in the background there's two Marshall amps. Yeah, I mean, you see the mixing console and me wearing a Celestian t-shirt, but behind me there's like two of my Marshalls. I don't know which ones, but I used Marshalls so much in the studio because they actually really, really worked well. Besides my Vox AC30, which is now hidden behind that other three Marshalls here. The point I'm trying to make today is there's several aspects. One thing is I want to go through a history of Marshall so you really understand what Marshall has created, the heritage and their achievements actually. And on another level, I'm thinking about what does this actually mean and how that is affecting my life today, or maybe our lives today in a way, and the changes that we see, like, you know, companies like Mesa Boogie, they now belong to Gibson, and Gibson was, Gibson was changing hands many times. But you know, there's also those traditional brands, like American brands like Peavey, and it's not the same anymore. I mean, all these founders of these companies, they are getting older, and there's the next generation, and the next generation grows up with different things in their head, and I think nobody will have the understanding of people like Jim Marshall. Well, if I would think about somebody like Jim Marshall, you have to understand the guy. This year he would actually become 100, and he passed away, I think, in 2000. When was Jim? 2012. It's not that long ago, but he was a musician himself. He was a drummer, but he was always listening to the other musicians. And when he had his shop where he was selling Fender amps and the just starting of the British blues invasion scene with Pete Townsend, Eric Clapton, Peter Green, and later on Richie Blackmore, and basically all the big names somehow had a connection with the shop of Jim Marshall, or even were involved in the product design in a kind of nice way, like Pete Townsend asking for these ultra loud amplifiers with like 100 watts later on, or Clapton using the GTM 45 and creating the tone of classic rock with the Beano album. It's all historical things. It is so huge, and Marshall was involved in all of that, and Jim Marshall personally was involved of all of that. He was there. He was always asking these guys coming to his shop what they actually want, what he could make better, and then when he hired his technicians to make the electrical designs, like changing the Fender Bassman to his first amp using British components, which then became the GTM 45, which is like mine over there on the top. This was, it was voiced in a way because Jim Marshall was listening to guitar players and he wouldn't stop until they were happy. So as long as Jim was there, there was always a feedback on the product design. I personally saw the guy many, many times on trade shows all over the globe. The only time we really met was on the toilet. But this, I was never kind of the guy that went to the Marshall booth and asked for his signature. And I didn't want to talk too much to back then to the guy. I was more interested in talking to like his engineers, like Steve Grinwood, the guy that is responsible for the JCM 800, and some other people. Anyway, so I give you a brief history here of the amplifiers, and maybe we can have. I see in the chat there's already a big discussion going on the 60s and the 70s. Marshalls or the GVM. So it all started with a GTM 45. And by the way, I have done, let me get the guitar out of my hands. I have done Marshall history tours a few times in my life. And the one I want to show you now, I did together with Captain's Guitar Lounge, a real expert on amplifiers. He designs his own amplifiers, and he also repairs or restores amps in the right way. And I can see here my little presentation, which goes back to July 2015. And in this meeting, it was so great because we put together a huge collection of vintage Marshall amps, and we really put them in a venue, and I played them all. I played them with my Strat and with I think it was a 59 Les Paul, some, the classic guitars, the classic amps, and the whole history. We went through all the years, so you can see all the amps that we had at this show. Okay, this is German for the Germans. This was a 45 from 64 that we had there, and it says 30 to 35 watts, and the tubes, KT66 tubes and a rectifier tube, and then the the according cabinet, which was an Alnico loaded cabinet. That is from that era. And by the way, that kind of cabinet is also in the Blubox as, what's the name on the Blubox? Stack 1965. So, just, and this is going back to the 58 Bassman. When I did the demo, I compared the Bassman to the GTM 45, so you could hear the differences. And of course, the Bassman has different tubes, 606s. The Bassman also has a rectifier tube, but it uses 4 10-inch Jensen speakers. Blah, blah, blah. So then we had a Mini Bluesbreaker. I'm just going a little bit faster here, otherwise we will never end. Here's a 66 JTM 45 combo with a, blah, blah, blah. Next, there was one, I think this one was one of Captain's first 100 watts. Model 1959 is the model number for 100 watt amplifiers, and the 100 watt amplifiers were introduced in 1965. So this was a novelty in the industry. And the model number 1987 is used to, was the name for the 50 watt version of the same amplifier. So it's a bit weird having all these model numbers, and why 1959? I always thought about a 59 Les Paul. It's a match in heaven, and it's fucking loud. And the good thing was we also played all the amps totally authentic with nothing in between, just the amp, no power, so straight into the cabinet. And this cabinet here on this picture we can see is a G12H with 55 Hertz 25 watt speakers. 55 Hertz were the speakers made for bass, which is the version that I have in my stack 1970, by the way. So here was a Bluesbreaker combo, blah, blah, blah. And there was a JMP Super Tremolo. So for those who don't know, there is the name GJ. Sorry. I always say G and somebody complains about it. I think it's, what's his name? Helmut. Okay. JTM, because this is called JJ Tubes and JTM. G Anderson and the BGs, the BJs. Okay, I fuck it up anyway. JTM and JMP, because so the name comes from T is Terry, which was his son. Anyway, going back to this JMP, which means Jim Marshall Products. For some reason he changed the name. Maybe his son became a teenager and he didn't like him anymore at that age. Anyway, so this is, I had one of those red cabinets as well. I'm sure some guy will watch the stream now and say, I have Mr. Bluke's red cabinet. I had one of those and they are fantastic. JMP Tremolo, yeah, I have one of those. It's actually at Peter Wyers at the moment. 50 watt, exactly one of those. No, mine is even older, because in 68 is still, or is this actually mine? This could be mine. The plexiglass front panel is the panel that we see on JTMs and on this 45 as well. This is where the name comes from. And then in, I think, 1969, they changed for this aluminum brushed panel, like the one that is a little bit which is this 50 watt that sits on top of this. So here is the real plexiglass, JTM black flag. You know, this is a sign. This is 67, and this is 65. All this plexiglass, and this is where the nickname Plexi comes from. And everybody today plays a Plexi. You have a Plexi, but I bet that only 10% of them have ever played a Plexi as it really is. 50 watts, 100 watts, no power soak, straight into the speaker. That's an experience. And that was an experience also at this convention, because, you know, 1971, we see a major. Major is the Marshall Major used by Ritchie Blackmore. It's a totally different design. You can see there's also one ECC 82 and 4 KT 88 tubes. So when we talk about tubes, we can see KT 66 at the very beginning. Then we have seen some EL 34s, of course, which, but we have also seen 5185, 5881, and the 6. So they use different tubes over the years. So not every Marshall has EL 34s. Okay. I got distracted. The major amp. The major amp is at this venue. You know, the 100 watts from the late 60s, 70s. They really hurt, because the 100 watts are so stiff and in your face that I'm not the biggest fan of them. They are, you know, classic rock to hard rock. But when the major came, there's even more power at hand. But that extra 100 watts is not that much, because the speaker kind of are on the limit as well. But anyway, we did it. We did it, and we boosted even with a range master, with my range master. So here, JMP. There's a 20 watt. There's you know, all these amps. There's an Artiste Combo. I was never the big fan of this one. The Mark II version. The Mark II version is around the time when we can see the master volume. So looking back at the evolution of the sound of loud, of the, well, creating the tone of rock, what we can see in the 60s is more headroom, more volume, bigger cabinets, and, you know, simply more masculine amps in a way, and even bigger, louder. That was what people demanded. And then when times were changing, there was the time when, you know, when I think it was Mesa introducing a master volume. So you could actually dial in some overdrive without being ridiculously loud. And this was in 1975. I think in 75, Marshall introduced the 2203, not as JCM 800, but as this Mark II version. So here we can see 1986 JCM 800, the dual channel, which is not the iconic one. I have the better one, which is just a single channel. That's the holy grail. They have done slight modifications with it, with the two channels, and then they brought in, I think even later on they had reverb. This is one with reverb, yeah. They were not as puristic as the ones, somehow in these days the technicians didn't have maybe all the experience how to get things sonically right when introducing features like effects loops and reverb, because when you think about the circuit of those iconic amps, they were pretty simple, and if you don't want to touch them, anything you change, even if it's the smallest change in impedance, just by adding a cable that's a little bit longer or some contacts, you change some aspects of the tone. And this only has, I think this took a few years until the engineers discovered that you have to compensate things to have that same sound, but using a longer cable or using a PCB, a printed circuit board, where the parts are not hand-wired. I mean, we all talk now about hand-wired and PCB versions. In my opinion, of course, the hand-wired amps are still the reference, but if you have a properly designed PCB, printed circuit board, for the components, you get the same results. But that's not as easy. It's not just taking the parts and putting it on a PCB and don't care about it. It is very, very sensitive. So, but by now, engineers know how to handle that. There was the first Marshall Jubilee series in 1987, the Silver Jubilee, which was 25 years of Marshall. And these amps are, you know, Slash likes them, Bonamassa, you know, he buys Dumbles because they are expensive, and he buys 59 Les Pauls and 58 Les Pauls because they are expensive. And but actually, I think he's most happy with these Jubilee amps. So, okay, let's move on. Wait a minute, there's more amps. Let me finish this overview of the Marshall amp designs, because the Silver Jubilee, and then there was more features coming in, half power mode, and this already in 87. So what's going on here? People were complaining in the mid 80s about Marshalls being too loud. And well, there was the master volume in 75, and then there was the half mode in 87, and then there was the channel switching with a dedicated clean channel or with like 2 channels and an overdrive channel. And then, you know, all these amps became more and more versatile. And in 1990, we saw the JCM 900, and the 900 is, we will hear from Geoffrey Whitehorn at the end, because he was there voicing the prototypes with some American guys, and the prototypes sounded fine and really good, but the production version was not as exciting anymore. You will see. So in the early 90s, there was also the Valvestate Transistor combos. And guess what? This is the time where I was already somehow part of being in the industry, with getting people and other companies to keep up with the things that happened. Because when you look at the Hugues and Kettner products from back in these days, there was, by the way, an RTS, Advanced Tube System combo, which is this one, 8060. And I think the Valvestate was the answer to that, because this was before. And this kind of challenge went on. There was like one company came up with something and another company had to respond with something. And back in these days, Marshall, started Valvestate, which was a transistor amp and an ECC 83 and a preamp for saturation. And it's not a bad amp, but of course it was more affordable. And then in 1992 there was the 6100 30th anniversary amp, and maybe you know, when they came out they had a blue Tolex cover, and some of them had the golden gold blue royal look and packed with features. It was like a 3-channel amp. And the former Marshall brand manager in Germany was a good friend of mine. And he knew how much I loved the Marshalls and how I used my Mesa Boogie and stuff. So behind the scenes, he brought one of those very early prototypes of this amp, the 30th anniversary amp, straight from the R&D department in the UK to my living room. I checked it, I gave him my feedback, and he was flying back to the UK the day after, and they fixed it. All good. So I knew what was coming even before the rest of the guy was. And I'm also one of the guys that is also responsible for the reissues of the Plexis and the Marshall SE100 Power soak. Wait a minute, I try to show you. This one here. Okay. And here is the story why this happened. Because I already had all these old Marshalls, and my friend, who was working at Music Maya back in the days, being one of the biggest, or maybe the biggest Marshall distributor worldwide, because Gotthold Meyer and Jim Marshall were good friends, and the German market was very important for Marshall, as other markets as well. But from the early days, they were friends, and even in the 60s they started to have business together. So there was a very close relationship, and what Music Maya said was important to Marshall. And my friend was the brand manager for Marshall with Music Maya. And of course he wanted to make money selling Marshall amps. And then he saw all, my vintage Plexi amps and how much I loved them and how much I did use them in the studio for recordings and stuff. And then he said, we want to have a reissue. And then he asked Jim Marshall for making a reissue, and he refused, because these amps were so puristic and they had a problem. They were too loud. And then this guy came up with a solution. He made the huge test centers for the German market, which meant like you have to buy 4 of those amps, and you have to buy maybe even 4 cabinets, I don't know. And they came with the SE100 Power soak to tame them, so you could crank the amps and can still play them in the store and experience the vintage Marshall at a decent level, not too loud. And this guy went back to the UK, and he placed such a big order that Jim Marshall could not refuse. And this is how it comes that we see these amps and the reissues. So this was the very first time Marshall did reissues. And then, later on, they came up with the JCM 2000. dual channel and triple channel. We all know which one is better. And then there was another great Marshall, which is the JVM. Victoria is Jim Marshall's daughter, which is a super flexible amplifier, kind of Marshall's Tri-Amp, maybe even better, maybe at least one of, I think, the most flexible 100-watt tube amp heads with tons of options, designed by Santiago Alvarez, who worked for Behringer in the past. Oh, Behringer! No, what I'm trying to say is there were clever people behind the whole products that they designed. Then they also had the modern vintage amps, which we don't talk that much anymore about it. In 2010, we had JDM Moddeling amps. In 2010, also that Swedish company Sound Industry collaborated with Marshall using the brand name for the headphones, and I still don't know if they did the fridges as well. I wouldn't mind to have a Marshall fridge. They probably take as much power as a 100-watt Marshall, but they are so cool. In 2012, Jim Marshall passed away, and after his death, there was the Historia series, and then there was another version of modeling technology with the Code series. In 2018, we saw the Origin series, and then not too long ago, we saw in 2019 the Studio series, which are their 800 Plexi and Silver Jubilee in a low power version. So for me, the question is, what is your favorite amp? Well, I have all mine here because I'm not missing anything here. I don't have a JVM 410. Why? Because it's a great amp, but at that time when this came out, I was already moving on to other solutions, including the stuff that I created myself and now with my amps as well. So let me have a quick look at the comments here. So JCM 2000, Valvestate, maybe Thomas can make a stream with a comparison of transistor amp like Gallien-Krüger. If you have one, I would do it, but I don't have the ML250 here. Actually, I kind of like that Gallien-Krüger format a lot, but last time I played it, it wasn't my sound at all. Okay, let's see. Somebody has a Valvestate, Lex Friends from the Netherlands. Okay, Noise Zone says, I don't get the vintage modern Marshall. I do get it, but it was not convincing to me. I tell you why. The modern vintage tried to be something like the 800 or the, that classic thing with a little bit of features, puristic. But for some reason, it was not boutiquey enough. I would say if the modern vintage was produced by somebody like Friedman, I think, all these companies, those boutique, how would you say, hot rod people or modifying amplifiers, it doesn't always mean more gain. It sometimes means also more tone or more usability. If Marshall would have done this 100% right, those companies would not simply exist. I see the Yngwie Malmsteen, Marcel Huber, yeah, that's another one. And JVM Joe Satriani, which is basically the same as the other one, as the standard one. I don't think he has many options. He also plays his pedal in front of it, and that's the Satriani sound. So Giffy Marauder. Marauder. My favorite are the 1987, the 87X, about Fender Princeton reverb. Okay, that's a Reusensee Royal Grande combo and a Black Star. And by the way, hey, Black Star wouldn't exist if Black Star are former Marshall people. So all that discussion, or all that different amps, for me, paint a picture. And that picture that I can see is Marshall is the originator of the sound of rock, period. The other companies, Orange and whatnot, they were also there, but nobody was as big and as influential as Marshall. Marshall is a household name. Marshall is the brand. Marshall is rock, and this is what they could achieve. And I think the guy behind that was the father of Loud, Mr. Jim Marshall. So for me, he had always a vision, but somehow the company, when I look at the last 2 decades, I mean, in the 60s, everything was clear, and the big names were with the company. In the 70s, same thing. In the 80s, changes happened, and then, bam, they could follow, they could produce the amp that was needed for the 80s. Hair, metal, rock, perfect. It started to be different and difficult in the 90s. Why? Well, I think it's complex. There's many different genres of music happening, and there are different brands that kind of try to get parts of that subgenre. You know, I'm not a Marshall guy, I'm an Orange guy. You know, I try to be different. Or Pete Townsend then became a Highwood guy, and you know, all this kind of no, I'm different. On the other hand, in my personal opinion, some of the products didn't really met the expectations of 100%. I'm not saying they are bad products, but it was so matching in the 60s and 70s and 80s. But in the 90s, you know, things got complicated, and somehow that connection between the brand and the market was already loosening. So on the one hand, this is when I see Marshall doing modeling amps, Marshall trying to do different things than just being the father of Loud. It's complicated, because do you really want a Marshall modeling amp? Fender tried the same thing, and the only market segment they are successful with that is the entry level, because it's very cheap. You can produce very cheap amplifiers using that technology, offering tons of features for the beginners that don't know if they are a metal guitar player. You use that program, or a rock guitar player, or an indie player, or clean guitar player, funk, blah, blah, blah. So you just dial in your preset on a modeling amp and you're fine. So that's kind of okay, but to have a real identity in that kind of market, like companies like Line 6, they produced amps, and they have their pedal boards, and they spent decades focusing on modeling technology or Kemper, coming up with the profiling process that these days many other companies try to do as well. Maybe they are the same, maybe they are worse, maybe they are better, but they are there, and they have a complete system which became an industry standard, replacing a lot of amplifiers, including Marshall amplifiers or Fender or Voxes. And some people even profiled an AMP1, my amplifier. But this is so small, you don't have to profile it. You just take it and... But my philosophy, as I told you many times, is I'm the analog guy. I come from this beautiful background, and this is where I want to be, and this is where I want to feel. I just want to bring this beautiful tone to the new reality where the stages are smaller, where you have to play at a little bit lower volume, but I still want to feel the amp. I still want to feel the band. And it's possible, but you have to reduce a little bit to get there. My question to you guys is, what is the vision of that company now, when it's being bought by a company that understood the energy of the brand name, which is the father of loud, and it makes sense for headphones, and they're actually pretty good. I came across this company when I founded BluGuitar because I wanted to make my headphone demos at the Frankfurt show using Marshall headphones, and this is one of them. And then I called my friends from Music Maya, who were the distributor back then. They also, this is another change. Music Maya is not distributing Marshall anymore. They have like in the Europe-wide distribution from Algam, which is a French company. They also have tight relationships, but all that changes a lot with artists, stores. The whole world is changing. So the industry is changing a lot. But when I tried to get these Marshall headphones for the BluGuitar demo booth, calling up my friends at Music Maya, asking for the Marshall headphones, they said, "Oh, we don't sell them. We cannot help you. You have to go to a Media Markt or one of those electro stores to get them from there." I don't know where I got them from, somewhere in the internet. And this goes back into 10 or, well, 2014 was the year when I did my demo on the AMP1. And this was kind of, interesting. And I thought, yeah, it's okay, it's a lifestyle product and it makes sense. But now you can see even more things are changing. And my question is, which formula will make a company like Marshall exist in the future? In the past, it was very clear to me, but I can see there are many obstacles and there's many things that have changed. And what is the vision of that company for the future? Because when the good people have no vision, or if there are no good people that have a vision, companies will lose it and will disappear. I don't believe that Marshall will disappear, but maybe what will disappear are the amps that made history. So these amps. And they're probably not getting any cheaper. That's the good message for all of you guys who have old Marshalls. Keep them because they are a piece of history. And they're great. But what products will this brand be selling in another 5 years or in 10 years? We don't know. But I'm always thinking about stuff like that as well, because I think it's kind of interesting to see where the industry, you know, the trends and the lasting things. Yeah. Anyway, I will show you another very important thing about Marshall, which are the cabinets. Because the speaker cabinets with Marshalls, we all have seen them. And, you know, there are the typical black ones, and there are some, you know, with a greenish and then with some other colors. And as we can see, there are a bunch of 55 Hertz speakers, which I personally like a lot. But there's also the 75 Hertz speakers. So at this show that I've done, I played all these cabinets. And to keep it simple, I will simply play my version of those cabinets with my Blubox. Because looking at the Blubox, which is the thing in the corner, looking at the Blubox, the first, well, let's call it this. In the middle is my Fat Cap, which is my personal 1x12 cabinet that sounds like a 4x12, which is a Marshall creation. I just try to get a cabinet that can make a similar sound, but for the modern stage with a single 112. And that sounds pretty good. So that's a 1x12. And of course, this is my own speaker simulation. This is not a thing. Next cabinet here is that magic Alnico loaded Stack 1965, which was the first 4x12 Marshall cabinet. Magic. For me, the sparkle is king with that cabinet. You know, it's like I just put the mic position a little bit towards the center, so we have more high. Towards the center of the picture, and I switch. Let me get a Les Paul just for fun. Because Les Paul and a Marshall is a winning combination. Wait a minute. Let me start with a 335 on this tone where it's, wait a minute, oh, my Les Paul will, don't kill the Les Paul. Alnico's. So what's the magic about Alnico speakers? They have a low wattage, but they have a smooth, silky high end. Anyway, that's the high end of this is the 67, which is loaded with the greenbacks, but 20 watts. So the 65 was 15 watts only, Alnico. This is a standard magnet and 20 watts. That's Eddie's favorite. Guitar out of tune. See, if I go back for the 65 now with the Alnicos, there is the rock. The rock becomes blues immediately, you know. So just readjust the amp a little bit and. Way bluesier, and this is way rockier. So the next one is 25 watts with 55 hertz, which is my favorite. Nice and dark as can be. So 71, I think, oh fuck, blackbacks or something is in there a lot harsher. Okay. This is the classic Stack 1980, which is loaded with the G1275. And this is a 4x12 loaded with V30s. Model number I forgot. Anyway, what you can see, even in my products, I have half of the classic Marshall tones. Why? Because they are the best. They are references. And they all go back for, you know, the tones that have created music. That these are the sounds that have been recorded with all the bands. The other side of my Blubox is this side, Fender and Vox and other cabinets. So this was just to show you the importance of Marshall being a amp and speaker manufacturer. I think Marshall cabinets are even as important as their amps. But unfortunately, we are not allowed to play that loud anymore. So there we go. There is no needs for big cabinets and stacks, full stacks these days. And yeah, somehow the smaller cabinets, they are okay, but they are alternatives. So they didn't focus on making the ultimate solution for modern days. I did that for myself, and well, if Marshall would have done that, there would not be any room for me to do stuff like that, because I never do products that exist. The only thing that can happen is that I'm getting copied, which happened in my life a couple of times. Okay, anyway, that's the speaker side of that company. And just for fun, I show you how much I'm inspired, or how important these amps are for me as a sound designer. So this is JTM 45. Wow, this is loud. Wait a minute, I have to bring the volume down a little bit, if this is okay. Well, this is a crank Marshall. Okay. Yeah, and this is the classic channel of the AMP1 Mercury. And that's this. As you can see, everything middle position, gain on 10. Well, I use both gains on 10, and then I use, well, a lot of middle and even more treble. Maybe it's a little bit bright setup with my JTM 45, but this is the way I use the amp for recording in the studio, and it really cuts through, and it has, this is the way it, to me, sounds best. And is there any big difference? I'm not sure. It's that close. Yeah, and we're talking about 20,000. I have seen this amp on Reverb for 19,900 US dollars, I think it was. And for me, it's here, and it has a reverb, it has a boost, I'm in a metal cabinet. I knew something was not my sound. Let's go back for the stack 1970. And then I use the mic position a little bit off center to make it darker, and here. That's my tone, and this is, let's get rid of the reverb and anyway, that's how much I'm impressed of these amps. And then I can switch for my other great JTM. This one has two purposes I have showed you before, which is the original side, which is this one here. Then I can plug into one of those and simply use it as the clean. Yeah. And the other side is my own modification to have a master volume. Oops. Hello. What happened to the sound? For me, killer tone. 100-watt plexi. It has the warmest, for me personally, the warmest tone, and it's not too loud. Yeah, it's just a killer amp. For the experts, we can listen to the undertones. Yeah, the L caps of the power supply are a little bit too weak, so there's this extra noise coming in. But this is to show you that I really cranked the amp. This is like master all the way up. This is where the magic happens, because when I reduce the master, the magic disappears. Let me show you. So this is so I tried with a mixing console here. It sounds okay, but let me show you with the master cranked. It has more gain, and it has, yeah, every stage is clipping, not just the preamp, it's everything. And this is, wow, this is where the line starts to roar. Yeah, killer. That's my AMP1. I think I'm very close. So anyway, I could go through all my Marshalls, but I think this will be too long for tonight. I have everything set up, but I think if I go on and do all that A/B comparison, and I actually did a lot of those amps in past episodes here on the Academy of Tone. Here's a little, I think we have a few photos that I wanted to show you as well. Where's my list with the photos? Okay. Yeah, I was at the Marshall Museum in the UK visiting the Marshall factory with all these beautiful amps. And this picture was taken at Music Maya, where I did a history of Marshall amps. This is in Milton Keynes, where I was visiting the factory. And yeah, this is the cabinet production where they make all these beautiful cabinets. And this, yeah, is the entrance when you go upstairs in the Marshall building. And there's a picture of me when I was 17 wearing a Marshall t-shirt and playing a Mesa Boogie. No, you can see how much I was into Marshall my whole entire life. So it's unbelievable. And I think this company has given a lot to the rock music, or the rock music has given a lot to them. They are so important. And hey, there's one picture in 1966, which is the year when I was born. Jimi Hendrix came to the UK, and his name was James Marshall Hendrix. And of course, he had to play a Marshall, but he was also very impressed by that. And, you know, we made this little mock-up about Jimmy's tone secrets, and this is a modern version of Jimmy's sound. Because I'm fan of both. And here's one thing I wanted to show you as well, which is when I introduced my AMP1 in the UK, I had this thing with me, and I wanted to show that 1.2 kilograms can do what those big heads can do. And therefore I made a band with a very loud drummer, which is Mel Gaynor, by the Simple, drummer of the Simple Minds. If you know Don't You Forget About Me and all these classic songs, that's Mel, and he is a heavy hitter. And we played like 100 meters away from the Marshall factory in the UK, and we played many venues. Yeah, hard rock music in Milton Keynes, which is close to the Marshall factory. But we also played, you know, all over the UK, just because I wanted to prove that, you know, my amp here is doing the real deal. And by now I'm so happy because there's players that I highly respect that use my amp, doing their thing with my amp, which makes me happy. But one thing again that was bugging me, that I was stumbling across the other day, again thinking about where are things going to. This is the future of amps. And I was looking at my AMP1 instruction manual picture with that history from like the 50s, or, you know, from the early days to, you can see there's my 3 Deluxe combo, and there's definitely some hidden Marshall stacks, a half stack, a full stack, the wall of sound, and then back to the half stacks again. And then we see like the Moddeling technology coming in pedals, and the big pedal revival these days. And that made me design a pedal amp. So that's the history here. And I was looking at that history for inspiration of my, what is my product? Well, there is the tone, as we can hear from the big amps, and the feel, because it's all analog. I'm not missing anything what you can see on this picture. I'm just missing the effects, and that's probably my next chapter with the AMP-X. So that's my kind of history, and that's kind of my vision. And this is where things are going in the BluGuitar camp. And just to say it again, I think Marshall is such a big influence on many levels, on tone, but also on identity. You know, why do I wear a Marshall t-shirt at the age of 17? Why do I play the amps? Why did I have, why you know, the full stack is here. This is this thing is the one cabinet, the other one is in the ISO cap. So this is the bottom cabinet of the full stack, and the other one is in the ISO cap. I sold all the rest, or yeah, I sold most of my other cabinets, but they are still here. And I spent all my life with Marshalls, and I'm sitting behind one in every live stream. Unbelievable. So guys, my question is, yeah, what's the vision? What is the story of different brands? What do you want to see from Marshall? What do you want to see from BluGuitar? What do you see from other companies? That's kind of a thing. Next week, that's a good question here. I see Helmut. Who will represent Marshall at the Guitar Summit this year, 2023? That's a good question. Officially, there's only Algam, the French company, and I'm not sure if they are coming. It's not Music Maya. Okay, let's see what's going on in the chat. I want a Mercury and Iridium in one for about 1200. Okay. I have a. This was actually my AMP2, but when I was there talking about visions, I thought, you know, let's go for AMP-X. Of course, that's not 1200, but this is this and this and this and the pedals, and that's what I came up with. Maybe I go there as well in the future, but later, if that's still needed. Let's see. But thanks for the comment. Thomas, it's not related, but did you ever find a pick similar to the real turtle shell? To be honest, no and yes. And there is, wait a minute, where is it? I think some people got crazy because there's this company called Blue Chip. Oh, here, this one. And this material is some special kind of plastic used in airplanes and whatnot. And it sounds pretty good. But this is the real, sorry, nothing comes close to the real deal. So the only way, I'm still experimenting with materials. Polycarbonate is also a good one, but nothing comes there. I'm still working on this. One day, part of my vision, I will find a solution, and then I will do my next incarnation of picks. Somebody is waiting on the BluGuitar headphones. Well, Marshall headphones are pretty cool, and they actually sound pretty good as well. I like them because they do have mid-range, And it's not like Dr. Dre's, which are probably great for hip hop, not only by the name. Uh, um, when I look at the whole thing, I'm pretty sure it's not made in Sweden. It's some Chinese or overseas production with the brand name on it. But at least somebody did something right because they are not horrible. I'm not saying they're killer, but they are not bad. So, and that's a compliment. What about a Horst Keller pick? Now we are. Hey guys, you want to make a pick episode? I think I had a Horst Keller pick in my pockets last week, and this week, no, it's. Let me see if I still have it in my pockets. No, I only have my own picks. I have a BluGuitar pick in my hand. It's not that bad. Compared to I think it's $80, one of those blue chips. And the BluGuitar pick? I think it sounds better. This is PMA. Don't ask me what it is. Polyamer, blah, blah, blah. It's a description for the material, which I like. And it sounds pretty good. Marshall will sell your AMP1 in the future. No, this is Blackstar. They already have their AMP1. Good luck, guys. The thick is in the pick. The trick is in the pick. Yeah, the trick is in the pick. The blue chip picks are totally awesome in the structural and self-liquid material. Yes, I agree. This is why I bought one of them. But it is as good as stuff that you can get on the market right now, but I'm still not. There's another level, and I cannot promise anything, but I'm on a mission. American Patriot. My go-to headphones still remain Sony's. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have to admit I have Sony. I'm not familiar with the model number, but I have a Sony that I like a lot as well. Okay. So guys, now it's time for a super nice, in-depth interview with my dear friend Geoffrey Whitehorn, who used to be another connection with Marshall, because he was at all the trade shows where I have been, and he was the guy on the Marshall booth. And of course, me, the young Thomas, age 20 or something, the first thing is, let's see what the big guys are doing. Where's the picture? And then, looking at this, we became friends at, I don't know what age this was. I was fucking young. Look at this, clean Thomas. And so nice, so good memories. And yeah, but trade shows also changed a lot. And by the way, I'm going to NAMM. For those who are in America and sunny California, next week I'll be there at NAMM, which is now at a weird time, which is the end of next week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The dates I don't know, but we are in Hall C at 7415. And NAMM, it's great to meet people. Unfortunately, Geoffrey is not here or there, but I will meet some other people still, which is great. Yeah. enjoy that special interview with Mr. Whitehorn. See you guys next week from LA. I will try to make a live stream from a rooftop jam with Ronnie Lee, and wow, there's killer vocalists there. It's an all-star jam. I don't know who will. Many people, and I will try to get my mobile phone streaming there for you guys, so you can enjoy it as much as I will. Yeah, I just hope we have good internet. So yeah, see you guys all next week. And now enjoy Mr. Whitehorn. Cheers. Very good. Some grandpas play bingo. Real grandpas play guitar. Yeah, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Geoffrey Whitehorn, a very dear friend. We go back to last century. We've been to many different places. But before we dive into a detail, I have to let you know that he has been a guitar player that actually really impressed me at my first time ever I saw you. I loved your tone. I loved your phrasing. Geoffrey played with Procol Harum the last years, back in the days with Roger Chapman a lot. And I guess you have a few other names you played with?
Yeah, I mean, I played with Bad Company for a little while. And after that, I played with Paul Rodgers as well for a couple of years. And obviously I played with The Who for a little while, just for a year. My first really band that was, I suppose, important, you might say, was a band called If, kind of jazz rock British band. I think we did, the band only lasted about 18 months at the time. I think I did like 2 gigs in England with them, and all the rest were in the States. I was in the States like solidly,
yeah,
which was a bit of a baptism by fire, but it was great. You know, I learned a lot of stuff, and after that, after that I ended up playing with Crawler, which was Backstreet Crawler, Paul Kossoff's band, and I had the honour of replacing him when he passed away and so on.
Yeah, I have a solo record of you that you did in the Marshall demo times. I remember that. And can you see that picture here?
Oh yeah, right.
This was you. I don't know, mid 90s, early 90s, something like this. And the guy on the drums is, I think, Nico McBrain.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. And he's sitting like this, waiting for you to finish your song, and then, you know, and I was in the audience and taking this picture, you know, with a whatever Polaroid or whatever thing.
Yeah.
Can you see this one? Wait a minute, this one? That's us in Paris.
Look. And how old were you there? About 12?
12 and a half, maybe.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think first time I came across you, I don't know if you'd come across to do an English, maybe kind of show for Hugues and Kettner or something. And I think you were like, 19 or something.
I was young. I was bloody young.
You were the best Jeff Beck impersonator I'd ever heard.
What can I say? I liked Jeff Beck a lot, but after this time, he still did albums, and Jeff Beck went even more Beckish, you know?
Yeah.
I kind of was into the medium phase of Beck, and then I did my thing, and then, you know, as you get older, you maybe you get what is the word? Maybe you're not copying that much anymore, because you kind of get lazy and just do your thing, and then you kind of become more your own in a way.
You don't really copy stuff anymore, but you still kind of absorb it.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I first met Gary Moore when we were both very young. He was about 19, I was about 20. I still had a proper job. But he,
Wow.
yeah, I know, yeah. And he'd come over from Ireland with a band called Skid Row.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he was still in his teens then. But I mean, I used to see him regularly in these music shops up in London near where I worked, you know, because he'd hang out all day, just playing, practicing, doing whatever, you know. And every time a Jeff Beck album came out, yeah, I know everybody sort of runs for the hills, but I mean, Gary would, by the next day, Gary would have bought it and learnt it, like note for note. You know, I mean, he was that. I mean, he could sit in the corner of this Orange. It was called Orange Music Store guitar shop in the West End. And I mean, he'd sit there just with a Strat or whatever, with a clean sound, and play like 2 notes and break your heart. You know.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I had a Gary Moore moment. I think on one of my first shows in London, actually, some Wembley guitar show or whatever it was.
Earl's Court, maybe.
Maybe Earl's Court. Yeah, I forgot about the venue. But the thing is, you know, I was explaining some Hugues and Kettner stuff back in the days, and then, you know, some guy was there, and then I turned around, and there was Gary Moore in an overall. You know, I mean, you know, the 80s style overall. You know, like,
yeah,
you know. And he asked me stuff like, this is Gary Moore, you know? It's like, he's real. He was there, you know? So this, it was a nice guy.
He's a lovely guy.
Yeah, and I met him again at the finalist thing when I won this Stratocaster Award by Fender in 2004. And there was, basically, there were them all. I mean, Brian May, the guy from the Eagles, Gilmore was there. I had a very nice chat with David Gilmour. Hank Marvin, you know, and so we had time to kill because there was like rehearsals and stuff. And so Gilmour and myself, we were just walking through that Wembley hall, you know, where and nobody in there. And then sitting there, and then Hank Marvin joined in, and he told me his Australia stories, and I told him how much I love Australia, and I have friends that live there, and so I've been there like 10 times to Sydney and all that. Yeah.
Hank Marvin was my first, obviously, being the age that I am, he was my first guitar hero, you know.
Of course, and actually mine too, without knowing, because before I picked up the guitar, I had a cassette from my mother, and there was this dum 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 dum. This was the track that I was listening when I was a teenager, 10, 11, just like after, you know, this kids play stuff. This was my first real music, and this was a deep that Strat sound. I always loved it, and I had a picture on the wall of was it a sailing boat or something? But this was, you know, this was the future. This was, I could escape by listening to that music.
Sure,
you know.
the Shadows were the best of their type in the world. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, there were American bands. There was the Ventures and the Safari, and so on. You know, but I think the Shadows did it best. You know. And I mean, that was just the music I grew up on. I mean, like you, I mean, I was born in 1951, so I mean, the Shadows were around from, say, 1958, 1959.
Yeah.
And I got my first guitar, I think, in 1962, and they were still hot stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just used to sit there with the Dansette record player, you know, and putting the needle on at the beginning and letting it go as far as you can till you make a mistake, and then putting it back again, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, these are the influences that we kind of share. I'm a bit younger, but you have been a big influence to me, because there's things that I remember. I mean, it's like when the memory that I have of you is you are, you know, on that Marshall booth, and you are not moving hectic like me sometimes. No, you're that cool guy that sits here and that has that super phrasing, you know, like. And then when you do when you did like your magic lick or whatever, sometimes I could see you smiling when you know, when the magic was happening. You put up your glasses.
Yeah, yeah.
It was so much fun. For me, I have that picture of you enjoying playing the electric guitar with killer phrasing. For me, you are the hero of phrasing. It's not about shredding. You are not the fastest, but you are the tastiest, and you have those clever licks, those, you know, that are a little bit odd, you know, and that have, for me, it is really English,
Yeah.
Tradition, but in your own style. I'm a fan of that kind of phrasing. It's like, I sometimes tend to overplay things, and you don't. And
I do. It depends how much I've had to drink.
Yeah, but yeah, and the same thing. Maybe you remember when we met in Garforth at the JHS events. You know, when there was the jam band with Gavin Colson and them all, whatever, you know, what was the drummer's name?
Who was the drummer?
There was one guy, there was one guy, Tim Gillespie, and the other one was Ross Ballard's drummer.
Yeah, maybe. Oh yeah, yeah, can't remember.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. And then, you know, we had this kind of jams. You did a set, and this was fun watching the whole thing. And I kind of regret a little bit that these days don't happen anymore. You know, when we go back for the Frankfurt Messe shows and the Paris Salon de la Musique and wherever we met, there was. You've been to all the shows. I've been to all the shows for at least a decade.
Oh God, yeah. No, I mean they were great fun, and you never knew who you'd end up playing with, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. I mean, I'd known Nico, for example, Nico McBrain, for a long time before we ever played together. But I happened to be at a NAMM show, a summer NAMM in Chicago, with Marshall, obviously. You know, and Nico was actually on the same. He was on the same booth because they had the same distributor or something. Yeah. So there's me and there's him, and we're friends. And what do we need? We need a bass player. So he goes, you know, Nico, I'll be right back. I'll be right back. I've got to go and find a bass player. And I mean, he came back sort of 10 minutes later, you know, with a bass player who neither of us knew. And we played like, I don't know, we played sort of Going Down and, you know, 12-bar sort of stuff. And it was great, you know. Yeah. Purely spontaneous, you know, and you know what can happen when music is spontaneous. It can be really, really good.
Yeah. You know? And I think these are the best moments you can have as a musician. For me, the magic, sometimes things are, they can never be repeated. They just happen because of a magic moment with magic chemistry. And it's like a soccer game. If you have that magic golden goal, it is there. And the next time you over rehearse something and you play a boring show, okay, that's, you know, I'm too old for that by now, because I've been playing all these pop gigs here in Germany, and it was fun, but lately I formed my own project called Rock Anarchy, which is kind of totally based on that concept of, you know, no rehearsal, only great musicians, and just fun.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it can still happen, you know. It can still happen. I mean, I've got a little band at home at the moment called The Strides, and there's 3 guitar players, right? Which sounds like a recipe for disaster, really. But And I mean, I joined. They were friends of mine, but I mean, I joined. I didn't really know a lot of their songs particularly, but you learn as you go along, and you make mistakes. And obviously, with 3 guitar players, different people can play different solos in different tunes, and so it keeps it all fresh and nice, And you find stuff to play.
Yeah.
That you're not thinking about it. You're just reacting kind of by instinct,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is what doing, a lot of what doing recording dates is about, because people hire you to interpret, I mean, some don't. Sometimes they come in with a sheet and they want you to play the sheet, but my reading's too terrible for most of that.
Same here. Forget it. I always survive by giving them good snippets or good ideas and good sounds. That was the reason why they hired me in the end. And I was happy
and having a good feel, having a good groove.
Yeah, the groove is the most important thing. If there's no groove in the studio, forget it.
Yeah, exactly. You listen to Luke, especially Steve Lukather, our friend.
Yeah.
He'll say he never ever got hired on a recording date to do solos. He got hired to do guitar parts.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he obviously did some fantastic solos for people, as we know. Well, they're all fantastic, but I mean, it wasn't what he was hired for.
Yeah. Well, yeah, similar here, and it's in the end, it's of course fun if you have your solo and where you can really shine. But of course, they need to finish their production, and it needs to be like spot on in high class production or whatever, credible parts to make some sound, to make that record sound good and professional.
I mean, I've had the pleasure of playing with, all sorts of people. I mean, Ian Pace and even Steve Gadd, Rick Marotta, and obviously all the great English drummers as well. Grant Ward and people, Clem Catini, even going back old school, And that, the best stuff, the happiest you are is when you actually get to lock in nicely with that drummer. And the bass player. That's music. All the twiddly stuff, that's just the icing.
I totally agree. And this is groove is everything and if I don't feel this is why I'm a little bit hectic in a way, but if I don't move, if I don't get the groove in my body, I play shit. I simply play shit. My phrasing is not happening. It's like I'm somewhere, but I'm not connected. So
you mean, I mean, your drummer is your best friend,
And that's why I love good drummers. And the drummer is the most important man in the band, because he sets the foundation, and that kind of everybody has to lock into that. And if that foundation is shit, everything gets all over the place. You can have the best whatever keyboard player and bass player, but there is no groove. There's no, the wave is not happening.
And there is a phrase, a band is only as good as its drummer, and that's entirely true. 100%.
I totally agree. Yeah. Hey, the other day I saw a video where you visited Anderton's, and what was going on there? Was this just a coincidence?
Sure. Lee had done a feature previously about he was doing a feature on the new Marshall, the remade Marshall pedals.
Yeah.
The Bluesbreaker and all that stuff.
The Governor and that metal shred, whatever. Yeah, I know.
Shredmaster and
Shredmaster, yeah.
Which they've now reissued for about 4 times the price of what they were before. But anyway, that's that's modern times for you. But yeah, my name came up, regarding old demos in, like you say, Wembley or Frankfurt or whatever. Yeah. And Lee said something like, Jeff Whitehorn, he must be getting on a bit now. I thought, yeah, you're right. But did you have to mention it? No, but he did say, give us a call. We need to have a chat. So I just gave him a call and we set up that little interview, which was quite fun. We didn't get through 30% of what we wanted to talk about. And we probably won't today either, but
No, it's always good. But I saw you were using this little piece of gear there.
I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. And as I said to you the other day, I'm ready for my Amp X whenever that arrives.
Let me tell you something. I have been leaving the R&D department 1 a.m. this morning, and ta-da!
You got it?
I got, it's this sound and and this thing, but there is one essential sound for me, which is the vintage channel on that amp for me, which is a hard thing to do because, when you look at all my Marshalls here, it's inspired by that kind of earlier Marshalls thing, and the vintage channel is in that territory, and I nailed it. It took 3 days just to recreate that tone on that MX platform, and now I know every part of the circuitry that I did put into the AMP1 back in the day. Like, it's important. There is any little, at the beginning, you start with something that, okay, this is technical stuff like the pre-EQ, and then you have that stage, and you have a post-EQ and the tone controls, and the obvious things that people can see on an amplifier. And you kind of get there, and you try to match the amount of gain and stuff like that, and then then after a while you go, but something is missing. It's a little bit mushy here. This thing has still something there. And then your ears get bigger and bigger, and you go down that rabbit hole, and that hole is so deep. And it was Sunday, and it's like I nearly had the crisis of maybe I don't get there. It's like, man, how can an Amp X be not as good as an AMP1 or as my promise,
Yeah, sure.
And it's like, and then, okay, think about it, and think about, wait a minute, there's zero cross distortion. This is what's happening when you crank a Marshall, and the positive and the negative wave don't fit exactly anymore. And that changes. There's a little compression of the power amp stage, and there's a little slightly overtone change because of this imperfection. That's also in the AMP1, and it's in the Amp X. So dial that in. How hot does the nanotube to be driven? Okay, and then wait, this is too much. Then change this and that and this and that, and then look at the whole amp from the power amp stage, and then from the input again, and from this side and that side, and then now I got it.
Good, man. Good.
So I hope that I will get more sounds with more experience faster. But this was kind of 3 very, very intense days for me, because I can feel my tones.
Yeah, sure. So you had your eureka moment anyway.
I had my moment. Yeah. So
it's great. I'm not a pedal board guy. I never have been. I'm into the amp, get on with it.
Yeah.
I say that, but of course, for the last 9 or 10 years, I've been using a Kemper anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's got all the stuff in it that I want. A bit of reverb, a bit of whatever.
And you can make it sound good because you're a great player. But how does it feel? How does it feel compared to a Marshall or an AMP1?
Well, it depends what it's coming back to you through, obviously.
Yeah.
I used it for the last 9 or 10 years with Procol Harum, but I always ran it through a combo. Funnily enough, a Hugues and Kettner Statesman 20 watt.
Well, and you have been Mr. Statesman with Hugues and Kettner back in the days.
Yeah.
That's another episode we have to talk about. But
well, they're like the Statesman, and I mean even the the programmable one as well. I mean, they're kind of like the amps that Marshall should have made and never did. We can say that now.
Now we can say that, yeah. Yeah. Statesman. Hey, this brings me back to after the Marshall phase, where you've been the Marshall demonstrator. You've been with Hugues and Kettner for how many years? Feels like another 10 years or so.
Probably, yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, yeah. I mean, it was funny. I think it was 2006. Marshall phoned me because I used to do Frankfurt every year. I mean, I did it for 20 years or something.
Yeah.
And there was a slight change at the top of Marshall. I won't say who, but I got a phone call and it was Jeff. Hello, are you making plans to come to Frankfurt this year? And I went, yeah, as usual.
Yeah, as usual.
And they went, well, we're very sorry to disappoint you, but we've decided to go for younger people.
Man, you are Mr. Tone, and you had, I mean, for me, a Marshall demo, and especially with Marshall being a traditional company with that kind of heritage, with that kind of quality. I'm talking, you can see all my Marshalls here, and I probably have more Marshall amps. There's even 2 more down there, and there's more in the next room. I have more Marshalls than Hugues and Kettner after Hugues and Kettner now. Yeah. And then kind of canceling the guy that really makes those amps shine the way that the sound of rock, I mean, we're talking tone, and
well, it was just me. It was just me and a guitar and a Marshall, usually. Yeah, that was it.
And that's the tone. And then I can see when the glasses go this way, the tone was right. I've been there, I've seen it, and I felt it every demo that I watched of you, and it was great. And later on with Hugues and Kettner, the same thing. I mean, we spent so many Frankfurt shows together where you did your 20-minute show and I did mine, and then we had other people.
And I used to steal your echo unit.
Going back to the Marshall thing, I mean, so we just heard that Marshall has been sold to that Swedish company that has used, the brand name and has been pretty successful making headphones and what is it, Bluetooth speakers and stuff like that.
All the novelty shit, yeah.
Yeah, and they have been so successful that they have made so much money that they even bought the company. And Marshall, this is what I read. What is it? Terry Marshall and Victoria Marshall. So the 2 successors have only 24%.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah. So all the rest goes to these guys. I just wonder what their future will be. Whatever it will be, we will see. That's not my thing. But looking back to you and the Marshall days, which was your favorite Marshall? Is there any Marshall that was standing out in a way, like that stood out?
Not really an amp, but I really used to enjoy the JMP1, the preamp.
Yeah, there's one rack space.
Rack preamp, And then the the later sort of DSLs and stuff, they were great. And I mean just before my time with Marshall, I mean the original 800 series were great.
Yeah,
fantastic. But I mean I went with Marshall to a NAMM show, so it would have been probably 1989, 1990 when the 900 series was due out. And we did a whole lot of we took a load of prototypes to NAMM. And asked whoever came in the booth, what do you think of this? Yeah. What would you like to do? What would you want more of? What would you want less of? Blah, blah, blah. So everybody's, we took in all the comments from all these great players in LA. And then I went with the prototypes to the warehouse in New York where they had some development guys over there. and we changed what we thought was necessary to produce what these
That
people
sound.
are asking.
Yeah.
And then so you so you had all these prototypes with extra wires hanging out and capacitors, string, you know, and all that stuff. They looked complete, but they sounded great. They sounded exactly, you know, like a more modern 800
version. Yeah.
You know, this was 1990, so we hadn't really got into sort of super modding Friedman sort of territory yet. Rivera was there, but I think Dave Friedman just used to do kind of private stuff for people at the time. So anyway, these prototypes, we fixed them all up with all the capacitors on strings, and they got shipped back to England with instructions to make them just like this. And they were nothing like this.
Hey, was Steve Grinwood the guy that had to do that job? Or was there?
He kind of was. Yeah, he was one of them anyway, for sure. And a lot got lost in translation, I think.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I think by the time it got back to Marshall in England, they went, well, yeah, there is this, but we can't do this because it's too expensive. And we can't do that because it's too difficult. So what we'll do is this. And they ended up with something that I thought wasn't as good as the 800. You know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, but I know that what is it, the problem about prototype? The golden amp. Sometimes I have that one that was kind of hand soldered, and all the tolerances of the components that you pick up, that they read the same value, like 100 nanofarad and whatever, 33 kilo ohms, and you put them in, but just by using the soldering iron a little bit too long, their value change. So and then this kind of spider prototype sounds magic, and then there's your first production run, and it's like, oh, it's all over the place. What is it? And
I mean, I thought the 900s were genuinely horrible to start with. They came out with one, and I can't remember what the model was called, but that was pretty good. But it wasn't one of the standard ones. I just say I can't really remember. But they got into the DSL stuff, which DSL was good. TSL was horrible. And so on and so forth. I mean, my favorite Marshall amps over the years. I mean, in my garage, I've got an old. It's called a Marshall Popular Combo, which goes. It's a little 210 combo.
210.
Looks like a sort of shrunk Bluesbreaker.
Okay, and that's good. That's a good one.
Well, it will be when I get it working again, but at the minute it's covered in dust, and really the light comes on, and that's it.
Yeah. I remember there used to be a combo that some people called a little fatty, which was a
little 15.
Maybe that was the one, a 12-inch speaker, and was it 2-channel design? Oh man, only one channel.
Yeah, it was called. I think. I mean, the official title of it was a Studio 15.
Studio 15. Okay.
Yeah,
I like that a little bit.
It's very good.
So that was one of my favorite, besides the real vintage stuff here. I mean, I'm talking about, this is a GTM 45 original 1965.
Sure.
And then the AC800 GCM, and I have all that.
They look great. They look great.
There's more in the R&D.
No, I mean that little Studio 15. I seem to remember a story. It didn't last long, but I think Martin Barr with Jethro Tull went out and he used 9 of them.
9.
3 wide and 3 high, and that was his stack.
Yeah, why 4x12? No, have 9.
I know. Why not?
When more is more, dude.
Exactly.
Yeah. When going back to the good old Marshall days, just to talk a little bit about it, is I mean, these were the days when Jim Marshall was still alive.
Sure.
And I mean, I never really spoke much with this iconic gentleman. I met him on the toilet once. Like, you know, it's like, okay, you know, Frankfurt, everybody has to pee. And then, you know, and there you are, and there's Jim Marshall. I said, hello, I'm this young, okay. You know, he was a nice guy.
He was a nice guy.
What are your memories of Jim Marshall? I mean, I heard stories of, he was, you know, there was the whiskey, the Marshall whiskey, and the cigar thing always going. I don't know. Was he a real rock and roller? Like,
yeah, I mean, if you like, he was a bit of a sort of hooligan, really, as far as that went. You know, I mean, all day at the Marshall booth, you know, he'd be signing his stuff and all that, and there'd be a huge queue of people, you know. Yeah. But he always had a little cup of whiskey under the desk, you know. So
yep,
he was a big wine buff, you know.
Ah, okay.
And you know, I mean, mostly, you know, he'd always, you know, after any of those shows, he'd take us all up to dinner, you know, paid for by him, you know, and all the best wine, best food, really good, you know, really, really good. So I used to get up for Frankfurt at sort of 8 o'clock the next day with a horrible hangover, and you know, I really disagree with playing the guitar before midday. To be honest, I think it should be banned. You know, I used to play horrible. You know, first demo in the morning, maybe 10 o'clock, 9:30 or something. You know, with a head, you know, with a fat head, and things didn't improve until, you know, the first beer of the day, really.
I was never. I mean, I was having a few times these, you know, party nights with others, and I got a good advice from my father, who said, you better have some magnesium pills before you go to bed and drink some water.
Ah.
The real expert.
Good advice. Sounds like a professional.
He is a professional. My father is actually a pretty, like Jim Marshall, wine fanatic, you know?
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, this bottle is only 80 whatever euros. And for me, the thing is, I never stepped in my father's footprints that much. Where he was, there was his place, and I was somewhere else. Yeah. So I still know what good wine is, but this is kind of his hobby, and I became the guy that has other hobbies, you know?
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, I mean, Jim was a lovely guy. He was very generous to me, you know, and I mean, obviously it was a real tragedy when he left us. And the company has changed since. No one can say different. You know, I mean, Jim wasn't the designer of the amplifiers, but he actually had. I mean, he was the engineer. He was, you know, originally kind of, you know, the engineer, if you like. Yeah. And but he had great ears, and he knew what he liked to hear. He knew when his amplifiers were sounding right and when they weren't. You know. Yeah. So that was the thing, and he was Marshall.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Jim was a musician. He was a drummer.
Great drummer.
So, and he was having a music store like in the 60s, and so he knew he was a proper musician with ears. And then, you know, having a company and being involved with so many different, actually now legends. I mean, you know.
Sure.
I mean, Richie Blackmore and them all. I mean, you know, they all,
and Eric and whoever.
Eric, at least every English guitar player, and maybe 50% of the Americans or even more, were customers or friends or connected with the Marshall brand.
Yeah.
And I think Jim was clever enough to get a very good understanding of what was going on, what the guitar players wanted, and he was
because he asked them. You know, it's like, what do you want? You know.
Yeah.
So you know, the 4x12 cabinet came because Pete Townsend asked him to make one. Yeah. Simple as that. So he went, well, hang on, I'll go away and think about that, and then he came up with the original one, and then and then he came up with the idea of slanting, you know, the top two speakers. So they projected over the heads of the audience, got to the back of the hall, you know.
Yeah.
Real simple stuff, but really clever.
Yeah, and it is now the industry standard, or it became the industry standard for 4x12s.
Absolutely.
And then like from the 60s to maybe today, but I think it's shrinking a little bit. The wall of sound, the Marshall wall with the full sticks, or the, you know, I mean, I think in the 80s everybody wanted to have a full stack, and then today it's kind of maybe half stack or maybe even less.
Well, yeah, there's so many. I mean, obviously you really can't take a full stack into a pub and do a gig. You know, well, you could,
yeah.
but I think you'd be thrown out very quickly. I mean, I think people got used to reduced volume levels, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that does make playing easy. I mean, controlling 100-watt stack is tough.
Yeah. And I think playing 100-watt stack is also part of learning how to control tone. For me, I especially founded a 3-piece band with, and I used a 50-watt plexi without master volume, without anything, just to learn how to play. And trust me, I played only 20% of the notes that I was playing before on a mesa or anything else.
I'm sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And but this, you know, getting this kind of wild animal controlled makes you play the tone. If the tone is not right, it's like there's nothing.
Oh, it's horrible.
It dies. It's horrible. So this kind of puristic approach, it's either you hit the note right and you have tone, or you don't exist, or you suck. Yeah, you know, it's that black and white. It's that brutal. But it was a very good school. So I had that band with a totally puristic approach for maybe a year, and then my singer, who is also the bass player, he was yelling at me because he couldn't stand that volume anymore. You know, in the little pubs, you know, it's like, and then I started to put on, you know, cases in front of my 4x12.
Yeah.
And then I got an SE100 Power, whatever, attenuator.
Yeah.
But then the magic was gone.
No, you're right.
And then I went another way.
I've never heard a speaker attenuator that sounds any good at all. Ever. There may be some now. I don't know.
The funny thing is, I could explain why it doesn't work, because the interaction of the power amp stage and the speaker needs to be free. And the moment you have a resistor load to that, they're talking about dynamic loads, boxes, and all that stuff today, but they are fixed. Even in the SE100 or other things, they have big transformers and coils to make that bass resonance, just like a 4x12. But it's not the same thing.
Because it's
going
just a straight line, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so it is not as alive as the real direct interaction of the power amp stage with the speaker. This is what rock and roll is about. If you're listening like to AC/DC and or any classic Marshall tone, anything that is in between will diminish that quality. So just leave it poor, play loud, and record it that way. That's the only way it's real.
Yeah, I mean, I used to, you know, when I was, you know, before I turned totally professional, I was playing in a nice band, you know, covers band in a chain of pubs in East London. And I mean, I had a Marshall 100 and a half stack and a 4x12, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could only use it on about maybe 3, you know, any more, because they get louder up to about maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And then they just smooth out.
Yeah.
Which is fun. But I mean, so I probably my style developed through having to hit the guitar really hard to get that sound.
Yeah.
You know, and which is probably why my right wrist doesn't. My picking is dreadful. It's awful.
Okay.
I just can't do that. I can't make it go fast. You know, so I have to rely on legato stuff, and you know, when I hit a note, you know I've hit a note. you know.
And that's the tone that I always admired hearing you, even when you played more high gain amps, like no, the TSL or 900 or whatever was the JMP1. With more gain, you can still hear the way that you learned how to hit that string to make that Marshall tone right with the old amp. It was still there, and it still was shining through more gain.
Excellent.
So I can tell this guy means it. It's like, man, there's the note.
You know, I grew up on, well, I said the Shadows first off. I mean, that was, but you have to bear in mind, not long after that, 3-4 years later, you know, Eric Clapton came out with, you know, John Mayall, the Beano album, as we call it. You know, I mean, that was only 1966 or something.
Yeah.
And obviously Peter Green was there doing that stuff, and Jeff Beck was there doing that stuff. I mean, this is like in 4 or 5 years, the whole approach to guitar completely changed, you know. And I was at the right age to kind of develop with it, you know, which was fantastic, you know.
So I was born on the Beano album, probably 66. That's my.
Yeah, there you are. You know. But I mean, you're a historian. I mean, you know all the stuff. So
of course, yeah, because for me, when it is so fascinating. I remember when I had my first vinyls albums, looking at the covers and looking at the pictures and looking, you know, I was interested in everything. Like, man, what's the grill cloth on this cabinet, and what kind of sneakers is this drummer wearing? You know, the weirdest shit. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, you know, what kind of cigarette has Eric got in his headstock on that Les Paul? You know, and that's important. You know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I heard stories about, you know, that album, how it was recorded. You know, and you know, the engineer, I think it was Gus Dudgeon actually was the engineer. He said to, you know, Eric, put the mic's here, you know, you put your amp there, and, you know, so the mic was there. Eric put his amp at the other end of the room.
But he insisted on doing that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously you could turn it way up, and, you know, it wasn't going to do any damage to any of the mics or anything, and it just sounded great, you know. I don't know how many of those solos were overdubbed, how many were live, I've no idea. But I think if you listen very carefully to some of the tracks, you can hear kind of ghost guitar in the background.
Ah, okay, so it's overdubbed.
Yeah, some tracks, I think. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, that would be my Desert Island album if I had to take one.
Cool.
Because it's all there.
Yeah. I'm wondering what my desert album would be. My desert album is, I have probably two I'm thinking right of. One is Led Zeppelin 2, you know, Whole Lotta Love and all this. If I say to you tomorrow, okay, that's an album that I just love to listen to. But there's some other, Deep Purple in Rock is a great album. You know, all that kind of 70. I was not even, I discovered that music before I was playing the guitar. That's the weird thing about it. So I'm a fan of music, and then later on I learned to play that instrument, and then I picked up some of that stuff. But my connection to that stuff that I listened to before I picked up the instrument is sometimes even deeper. I don't know.
It was there anyway. It was, you were meant to be who you are, Thomas.
Well, I can't help it. I mean, my parents they are to blame for everything.
My parents are definitely not to blame for any of it, because they hated the whole idea. But there you are. You know, I wanted to be a drummer first anyway.
Guess what? Me too.
Yeah.
And what happened is I had that band with the drummer, and the drummer brought the drum kit to my parents' house, and we set it up downstairs. And then when the rehearsal was over, I tried to play, and I enjoyed it so much, but my parents hated it. So
yeah, exactly.
So this was the end of my drummer career.
I think I used to. I mean, I got hold of a pair of drumsticks from somewhere, You know, anytime there was any music on the TV, I'd just be playing on a cushion or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my parents used to absolutely hate it. You know, they said, "Well, well, we're not going to buy you a drum kit. So what? What do you want to do?" You know, and obviously the guitar thing was, you know, that caught my imagination as well.
Yeah, for me, they gave me an acoustic guitar with nylon strings that lasted for about 2 weeks because I was into electronics already. So I bought a pickup for the nylon string, built my own transistor amplifier, which was totally horrible, and experienced the biggest problem of feedback on the acoustic first. Then I bought, you know, I learned it from scratch with the acoustic guitar and a pickup. Then I found out, you know what, there's I had to get stuff into the acoustic guitar to get rid of the resonance, you know, to make it kind of solid bodied alike. Then I learned, oh man, I probably get a proper electric guitar. Then I had that electric guitar. Then I played with my homemade transistor amp with an 8-band EQ and some transistor overdrive, horrible sound like bees, and you know. and then the next thing I got was a Siemens tube amp from a church, which was somebody, you know, they had this kind of, they were renovating a church for this big microphone, and I used that, and I used my wah-wah pedal to get some of the bass off because it was like too farty. Yeah, so, and then of course 10 watts all tube was pretty loud, so I was facing my cabinet on the floor, and my volume control was how much did I lift the cabinet.
Right, that's good. I like it. Yeah, I mean, I discovered, you know, the sound we like, you know, the basis of the sound we like. I mean, I was in a band doing covers of that Bluesbreaker stuff when I was like 14 or something, and I had a Framus guitar, semi acoustic, like 335 type thing. I didn't have an amp of my own, so I used to, the other guys in the band were older than me, so I used to plug into a Selmer treble and bass 50, which was the one with all the funny little presets, the contrabass. And the closest I could get was kind of the contrabass thing, you know, because it was woolly and dark, and it sounded like shit anyway. But one day that blew up. That amp went wrong, and they said, "Oh, well, we've got another amplifier. It's this old Vox. I don't know if it's any good, but it was a Vox AC15, which whoever had used it previous to me had left it on full volume." So we just plugged this thing in, and obviously being a tube amp, it took time to warm up. So I'm just playing away, and it gets louder, and all of a sudden there it is. That's the magic. That's the sound. That's, you know. Magic, absolute magic. And I was changed. I was a changed boy from that day.
I totally get it, because same with my experience. Now the question for me is, where is this all going? Now we have, you know, we can look at, this was the first 50 years. I mean, last year was 60 years of Marshall. There wasn't any book, but so, you know, there's this long history of that tone and of that company and other companies. I mean, you know, Fender and Mesa Boogie and blah blah blah, and Hugues and Kettner, and what do you think? What is the future like?
Well, I mean, obviously the modeling thing is getting better and better and better. I mean, I've been perfectly happily using, as I said, a Kemper for 9-10 years. I'm very happy using the AMP1 because I think it's delightful, you know. And then, you know, you can actually get these little amps in a box type pedals, you know. You started it, I think, but everybody's doing it now. And they're good, you know. And people, you know, obviously there's a lot more kind of volume restrictions at gigs these days, especially, you know, smaller gigs, pubs and clubs and stuff. You know, so I mean, it has to proceed, I think, along those lines, really. you know, and you know, we want the AMP-X. We want the AMP-X. Give us the AMP-X. We want it now. When do we want it? We want it now.
I will, this year it will happen, and you will get that, because for me, the thing is, the X will be as flexible into all the directions. So, you know, I thought of the past of this, the real history of rock and roll, and the 100 watts headroom, if you want it, you know, that tone that hits you. If you still have a town hall that is big enough and you want to be having that experience, it is possible with the AMP-X or the AMP1. But on the other hand, I'm totally aware that even with, you know, a pub situation with like a nice 1x12 and a drummer, maybe even a guy that has an electronic drum kit, which needs to be improved as well.
Yeah,
I have an idea. I have an idea for that. One day is my next project, because, you know, there's something fundamentally wrong about all electronic drum kits. But this is my next chapter after MX.
It's obviously, I mean, that's obviously down to a feel thing again, apart from the sound, you know.
It is the feel thing.
Yeah.
And it is about the latency, and it's about other things. Because anyway, no, this is a different. I keep my.
That's episode 2. Episode
2. But no, for me, the thing is, you know, I play pub gigs as well, and different size of gigs. So this kind of reality, being in a room where you have to have a good feel and being loud enough but not too loud, so the sound guy puts you on the PA, but you can still, you know, have something coming from stage directly. And I think that there's also a reality where, like, a 4x12 has too much long throw. It's like the mixer here is
directional.
Yeah. So the guy on if there's a guy on the mixing board, you know, some venues you do it yourself, or, you know, has the guitar too loud, and then it's not in balance anyway. But so this is kind of another scenario, and then of course there's a lot of people going direct, where they, you know, plug into anything and even use in-ears. I mean, just yesterday somebody was having a rehearsal at our company where we have our office, and there's like a rehearsal room downstairs, and they all play in-ears. So the only thing you hear is the drummer, and sometimes somebody is screaming. No guitars, no bass, no nothing. It's so funny, you know.
Yeah.
You open the door and somebody screams, and they're living in another world. It's all okay. There's new reality. So the direct tone needs to be spot on, and this is probably something that Kemper has managed to bring up to the next level. And so now we are living in that age, and I try to do my thing. Let's see.
You know, the Kemper's better than the Fractal, or the Kemper, you know, the Fractal's better than the Kemper. It doesn't really matter. I mean, they all work really pretty well, you know, and that's down to your ears to just tune it in, you know. Exactly.
I think in these days you can get a great tone with almost any gear. Let's say it's there's a lot of products out there. If you know what you want, and if you know how to dial it in, you can get a good tone and make it work for you.
Of course you can. I mean, there's some. I mean, I'm not, like I said before, I'm not really a pedal man, but there's some great pedals out there, you know, and you don't have to pay. You know, you don't have to pay $4,000. You don't have to pay $4,000 for an old, you know, Klon or something, you know. Yeah. Because there's Chinese companies that will sell you something really close for about $30, you know.
Yeah. Like, I know, even the Behringer Tube Screamer uses the original chip, you know, that sought after, and you get it for like nothing.
Yeah.
It's a plus. Yeah. Anyway, so if you know
I've got a it's a clone of the Friedman OD Brown Eye pedal thing, the ODX Plus, 2 channels, It's 2 channels and a bypass and all that. But it's a Chinese one, and it's actually spelled FREEDMAN.
That's very close, yeah.
And it was like £50 as opposed to 300 for the real thing, you know.
Yeah.
And it's damn close, I tell you, damn close.
Yeah. So if you know what you want, you can get at any budget level. You get something.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, Dave Friedman, he kind of did the job on taking the Marshall tone to that kind of next level.
Absolutely.
Which I think Marshall should have done. I think Friedman wouldn't exist if Marshall would have done a better job.
I don't think any of these companies would. I mean, I'm not even sure. I suppose Mesa is more of a Fender development than a Marshall development. But, you know, the Bogner or whatever, companies like that, you know, that would be Bogner who, you know, Reinhold who, you know, if Marshall had managed to develop in time. But they did sit on the laurels a bit. And we haven't seen any new. I mean, yes, we've seen, as you say, we've seen Bluetooth speakers and headphones and, you know, practice amps and silly shit like that. But, you know, where's the real stuff? You know?
Yeah, where's the real stuff? And for me, the question is also coming from this tradition, being the father of loud. What is the father of loud is too loud in the pub. I mean, even if these days, if you have a 4x12 and you put it on a stage, you scare people.
Yeah.
It is like, even if you play lower than my little tiny combo in real volume, people think you are too loud just by the cosmetics.
It's going to look loud.
Yeah. So I think it's
to carry all that shit around anyway. I mean, who wants to do it? You know.
No, I'm so glad that these days are over, because I had my back problem, you know, lifting all that stuff. And you know, back in the days, we had a keyboard player with a CS80 Yamaha synthesizer and a what was it, the CP70 grand piano.
Yeah.
And I mean, the car was going, you know, and then the 4x12, and this is I mean.
And if the gig's got stairs, forget it, you know.
Yeah, and the Leslie and the Hammond organ, no way. These days, it's so good. I mean, 1.2 kilograms. I put it in my gig bag, and
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, I've got one of those Toman double gig bags, you know, and even that's too heavy, you know. With 2 guitars in it, put 2 Les Pauls in there. That's heavy.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, talking about Les Pauls, I mean, you know, I was always the Strat only guy, and just over the last few years, I got more and more into these guitars, gold tops, and I think you do have a real 57.
I do. Top? I do. 76652.
The serial number is?
Yeah.
Okay, this one is like, I think it's a 68 that I tried to make like a 57.
All right.
Because they are too expensive for me.
I mean, I've had this thing for 50 years.
Of course, when you bought it, they were you could still afford them.
Well, they weren't cheap. I mean, no. I mean, I paid £350 for it, which sounds really silly. But if you were earning, this was in 1972. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
If you were earning £1,000 a year, £20 a week, you were doing okay.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
say it's the equivalent of, I don't know, what would that be? It's probably the equivalent of about 10 grand or something. Yeah. Which is a lot of money.
Yeah, but now it's well, the prices are ridiculous. But one day I want to play yours, because I fell in love, especially with the 57s, because I found that most 59s are not having that kind of twang anymore. So some of them, of course, they all vary, and you can't say every 57 is the same and the 58s and blah blah blah.
Well,
but
the
it's like,
pickups were all over the place, you know.
yeah,
But
exactly.
mine, the ones on mine are like 7.6K and 7.3, way down the scale, you know.
I love that. I love that.
So you need to buy some cream tea GT57s, Thomas. Because Thomas Nielsen cloned mine. Yeah.
Okay, I'm all in for that. Yeah. Okay.
I'll just show you something.
Okay.
One stick along. So this.
Oh.
So that's
yeah.
It's an Edwards.
Nice. Okay.
And it's Japanese. What's the company? I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, it's it's ESP. ESP make these.
Okay.
Well, this is 2006, and I mean I picked it up for 400 quid.
Yeah.
And I've now got a set of. It came with Seymour's actually. It came with a Jeff Beck and a 59, which was standard, which wasn't bad. Wasn't bad. I've got these GT57s in here now, and it sounds exactly the same as my old one.
Really?
Yep.
Man. Okay, then yeah. I'm on a mission here. Yeah, it looks cool too. Yeah, knock it over so it gets a little bit more relict.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. I'm sure I will.
Yeah. Hey, Geoff, I think we have to do another episode, another day, another time. But it's, I think it was a real, for me, it was a real big pleasure thinking about all that stuff from the past and.
We've got lots to discuss yet. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, and I promise next time I come to the UK, I will try to meet you somewhere.
I'll come and find you. Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And just let me know when my Ampex is in the post. All right.
Okay. I'm working on it. I promise. Just for you.
Have a great NAM and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'll do my very best and speak soon. Okay, cheers.
All the best.